Hello, welcome to the Middle Earth Fantasy Channel. And now we are going to take a look at the Rings of Power. And of course, to review the Amazon's Rings of Power, we have to put on the Ring of Power. This is the Ring of Power, by the way. As you can see the elven inscription there. And with this, I have knowledge of all living things. So we're going to do a little bit of a review on what I think and how I would have actually liked to see Amazon actually do this Rings of Power. I do think they deviated a little too much from the original source material. Now, one thing about the thing that kind of like threw me off, the Rings of Power that threw me off, is the timelines. I don't actually mind that they put Galadriel as this like fierce Amazon warrior woman. I actually think that's sort of accurate because we don't really know what Galadriel was like in the Second Age, and in Tolkien's own letters, he actually did say that Galadriel was athletic as any of the male elves and had Amazon-like disposition. So I don't think that portrayal is completely off, because we don't really know what Galadriel was like in the Second Age. Did they embellish it and go overboard? Yeah, probably. But you can't really say that's wrong. But what's really, really jarring is the timelines, because Celebrimbor and Elendil and Miriel and Ar-Pharazôn were not from the same time. Celebrimbor, when he created the rings, Celebrimbor is the son of one of the sons of Feanor, and he actually lived from the years of the trees until mid-Second Age. Elendil, Ar-Pharazôn, Miriel were actually people from the end of the Second Age. So technically, Celebrimbor, Ar-Pharazôn, Miriel, they're about 1,600 years apart. But the Rings of Power has them all come together in the same timeline. So that kind of throws the narrative off, and that's basically directly counter to what the canon stuff is in the Tolkien universe. So we have that. The other thing is the relationship between Galadriel and Gilgalad. And, they portray Gilgalad as this wise and older king and Galadriel as this young upstart elf. That's actually not correct at all. And I don't think like the relationship between them would be like, king and like, a commander of the army. Galadriel is actually significantly older than Gilgalad, being born in the years of the trees. Now, depending on which timeline you actually look at, whether you think this actually takes place in the middle of the Second Age with Celebrimbor or at the end of the Second Age with Ar-Pharazôn and Elendil, Galadriel's anywhere between like 3,500 years old probably, and roughly around like 7,000 years old by the time of the end of the Second Age. Actually, at the end of the Second Age, she's probably like more like 5,500 years old, depending on how you count the years of the trees. So she is not a young, brash elf. Yes, she has much anger that Finrod and her other brothers were actually killed by Sauron. And here's the thing, Galadriel, by canon lore, she is actually Gilgalad's great aunt. She is the younger sister of Angrod, and Angrod is the father of Ordith, who is the father of Gilgalad. So Gilgalad, in relation to Galadriel, Galadriel is actually of a higher bloodline. Now, the reason she's not High Queen of the Noldor is because Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings from a British perspective, and it was supposed to be like British folklore. And because Britain at that time had male preference primogeniture, basically in terms of descent, basically if there was a male heir available for the throne of Great Britain, he would take precedence over all the female heirs, and so it was in Tolkien's world as well. So that's why Gilgalad is High King of the Noldor, and Galadriel isn't High Queen of the Noldor. If they just basically didn't have male preference, Galadriel would actually have a stronger claim to the throne than Gilgalad, being basically the direct daughter of Finarfin, whereas Gilgalad is basically the great grandson of Finarfin. So Galadriel actually has a higher bloodline than both Gilgalad and Elrond. And she was also born in the Blessed Realm in the Years of the Trees. We don't exactly know when Gilgalad was born. He could have been born late in the Years of the Trees or sometime during the First Age. I don't think canon actually specifies which year he was actually born. Different sources will actually say different things about that. But the timeline mix-up is the most jarring because, like I said, Celebrimbor, Ar-Pharazôn, Elendil, they're about 1,600 years apart, and that kind of just like messes up with the lore. Now, the new characters they added in, like the Black Elf Well, I mean, like not the black elf, like the African American elf, the African American dwarf queen, for kind of like diversity's sake. I'm okay with that actually. I'm not in love with it because I think they should have stuck to the original script. And basically, since Tolkien actually wrote this to resemble like basically old England or old Britain or like a British folklore, there weren't too many basically non-white people in Britain back then, and as a result, I wouldn't actually have minded it if essentially like they just had all white actors. I would have been perfectly fine with it because he actually wrote it as British folklore. I don't really mind it, but it's not something I actually prefer. It's just like I don't like them sticking like in random white guys and like in like Asian historical films like that are based on Asian history or and Asian folklore. I don't really prefer them sticking in like whether it's like black guys, Asian guys, whatever in like British folklore. It's kind of weird, and I'm not a huge fan of that. I think they're trying to be PC and inclusive and all that stuff, but sometimes I would rather they just stick with the original script. I think like one of the Asian actors was like, I have not seen an Asian elf. I'm like, what the hell you get an Asian elf? This is like supposed to be like medieval England. There are no Asian elves in medieval England. So I'm actually okay with their casting choices, but I would rather have them stick with the original script. Now, the different storylines coming together, I do find that a little bit jarring. Like in Tolkien's mythology, there's like a great timeline flow of like everything that actually happened. And like in the Second Age, there is a little bit of literary freedom because there's not too much history about the Second Age besides the actual fall of Numenor, starting very high with Elros and then coming down to like Tar Minastir, which is the 11th king of Numenor, which like he actually sent a great army to actually defeat Sauron and Eregion. And then like, but he also was envied the elves for their immortality, and that's when the shadow first fell on Numenor. So there's kind of that part of it. So they're kind of skipping like a lot of the lore of the Second Age and setting up kind of like their own world where the rings of power were forged around the same time as Elendil and Ar-Pharazôn, which is definitely not to the script. Now, so right, I actually have enjoyed the series. I think the character development is a little bit thin, and I'm not really sure about like the 6 or 7 competing storylines that are coming together. The portrayal of Elrond is also kind of weird because like they actually said, I think in the first or second episode, that he was not allowed to attend a certain meeting because it's only elf lords. Now that's weird because Elrond is definitely an elf lord by bloodline, and by this time, whether if in Celebrimbor's time, he was probably around like 1500 years old. By the time of the end of the Second Age, he was over 3000 years old. So he was not like, he's not an old elf, but he's definitely not a youngin in terms of elfdom. Because remember, Elrond was born late in the First Age, right before the War of Wrath. So the thing is, like, Elrond would have been able to attend that Elf Lord meeting because he is an Elf Lord, being the son of Arendelle, and being descended both from the Elven royal houses and the royal houses of men. And plus, unlike Elros, he chose to be an elf. So Elrond is definitely an elf lord. So that was a little bit weird. The thing about Durin and the Mithril thing and everything, I think that's perfectly fine. Just like there is some literary freedom to make up, but there are things like the timelines and stuff that I would rather have them stick to the script. Overall, I kind of give the Rings of Power maybe like a 3.5 out of 5. I do kind of enjoy some of the cinematics. I have enjoyed the series so far, but it really kind of like deviates from Tolkien's writings. And if you're going to write about Middle Earth, like at least like even in the Second Age, you should stick to the overall script. Now, how I would have actually liked them to see the Rings of Power, I think that I would like for them to actually divide it up into like, several seasons, which they did, but I would want them to stay with the timeline. Like the first episode should actually be Elros Tar Minotaur to like sailing to Numenor, guided by the star of his father Ariendel. And then like, you would skip after that, you would actually like, have the story of like Tar Aldarion and his love for the sea. I would have really, really liked to actually see kind of that. And like, early in the Second Age, they're already reporting that maybe Sauron essentially maybe have some influence on the East. I would have actually gotten that as well. And then, of course, like later on, maybe like late in the first season, you'd have Celebrimbor making the Rings of Power. and then Sauron waging war upon Eregion, killing Celebrimbor, and then basically hard-pressing Gil-galad, and then Tarim and Astir, the 11th king of Numenor, sending a great fleet to actually defeat Sauron. And then, like, after that, I would probably jump to later in the Third Age with Elendil Ar-Pharazôn, Tar Palantir, Muriel, and all that. I would tell the story as it is there. And then, of course, like Ar-Pharazôn taking Sauron back to Numenor, the corruption of the Numenorians, and then like the fall of Numenor. And then the last season, I would actually have like the establishment of Arnor and Gondor, and basically the War of the Last Alliance. So I would probably divide it up into 3 seasons that way. I think they're gonna like piss off a couple of Tolkien fans because this timelines aren't that great. I'll be interested in watching this series. I'll probably watch however many seasons they have, but I am a little bit disappointed that they actually took off a little bit too much, deviated too much from the script, and didn't stick to the original timeline. And some of the characters like Galadriel and Elrond are a bit jarring, especially Galadriel. I think they went too far with the whole Amazonian presence thing. I don't think she would have been like that in the Second Age. Although I think she would have been like a warrior elf, I don't really think she would have been exactly like that in the Second Age. But overall, I'm enjoying the series. Give it a 3.5 out of 5. Definitely take some points off from deviating from the original timelines of the script, but I think overall it'll be kind of like a fun series for me to watch. And plus, I like more Tolkien content. But I do want someone to actually do a accurate, basically series on the Silmarillion. That would be really nice, starting with the music of the Ainur and then ending with the War of Wrath. So let me know what you think. What do you think about the series so far? Like and subscribe, hit that bell notifications button. Thank you and have a nice day.